I'm from Huntersville, and the door shut. And I never saw her the rest of the weekend, so she was there.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the October 9th regular meeting of the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners. If you would, all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have not received any changes to the agenda. Do you have any? Okay, and if not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Burns. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have no one signed up for public comments, so on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion to adopt the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, next up is some recognition. Before we get to the formal recognition, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish Waxhaw United Methodist Church a happy 130th anniversary. This past weekend, they celebrated their 130th birthday as the first church in Waxhaw. They've witnessed all the changes that have defined Waxhaw. They saw Waxhaw as an incorporated town come into being just in their first year. And over the last 15 years, they've seen probably the most dramatic change, not just the size of Waxhaw, but a dramatic change in the diversity of culture and in faith across the 28173 zip code. So it was an honor to attend their celebrations on Saturday and Sunday, and it was great to have a chili dog after going to a health and wellness ribbon cutting. But I want to, on behalf of the town, again, congratulate them and offer them the town's best wishes. Okay, next up, the North Carolina chapter of the American Planning Association recognizes agencies and individuals that have completed outstanding projects each year. And they've done that for the past 40 years. And they do it through the Marvin Collins Planning Awards program. The Marvin Collins Award represents the highest standards of achievement in the planning profession in North Carolina. Waxhaw's very own Lisa McCarter, Planning and Zoning Administrator, wrote the grant and was an integral part in the plan for the Carolina Thread Trail Cross-State Suspension Bridge. Lisa and the Planning Division have been awarded the 2018 Marvin Collins Award for Outstanding Planning, Special Theme Award, Multidisciplinary Project. The Waxhaw Parks and Recreation Department have also been integral in bringing this project to fruition. Dina Sabinski and Billy Sellers are here on behalf of the Parks and Rec team, and the award recognizes the excellent example of teamwork and regional partnership between the Waxhaw Planning Division, the Waxhaw Park and Recreation Department, Lancaster County, South Carolina Planning, and Lancaster County, South Carolina Park and Rec Departments, and the Carolina Thread Trail Organization in completion of the Cross-State Bridge Project. Billy and Dina, you want to come forward? Congratulations. So, and we're short one plaque here tonight, but Lisa McCarter from the planning side. First we recognize the Parks and Rec, and now we recognize the planning side. Congratulations.
Thank you.
One more. Okay, next up are a series of presentations. First up is our Finance Director, Lisa White. We'll do a fiscal year 19 financial update. Lisa? And Nick, would you turn on the projection?
Everybody.
Numbers look beautiful.
Yeah. Having a good year.
Do you have any opening comments that you would like to make?
Well, I'm going to go through a little bit of a review when I start out a little bit. Okay. Mostly, I think the commissioners understand, but just in case we have new people or anybody watching, I kind of, every time I do a presentation, I kind of want to do a little bit of a refresher and a reminder, just so that whenever we get ready to do budgeting, the citizens can understand as well. But we are required to use fund accounting. It's called fund accounting, but it's really governmental accounting. It's a different type of accounting than a business would use. Businesses are in business to make a profit. Towns are in business to provide services. So there are different rules to accounting. The biggest difference is that there are separate funds, and each fund has a separate budget that's adopted, and it has its own financial statement, and they really have different purposes. And so whenever citizens are looking at our budget, it's going to be important that they understand that, because things don't move between the funds, and not everything is going to appear in the budget ordinance. If somebody looks at the budget online, they're not going to see every fund. They're not going to see the TAP grant, because the board passed a capital project ordinance, and at the beginning of the project, that's when the board sets aside the money for that project, and that project stays in a multi-year fund until the project's done. So I just thought we'd go over that a little bit. And we are growing. If you remember, this board, we worked last year on separating some of those projects. Some of them, a lot of them, were all mixed up in the general fund. It made it really hard to figure out how much money we had to operate on and what was restricted. Powell bill is restricted specifically for streets. The police funds are restricted by state or federal law. So we extracted all those out of the general fund. So now, after today, we have a budget amendment, which we'll go over in a little bit, but we'll have 22 separate funds. So each of those funds has a separate purpose, and things don't go in between. So, for example, the rental property fund, we charge rent there, we have maintenance there. Whatever revenues over expenditures end up in that fund stay in that fund. That rental property does not support the general fund. It does not go backwards. The money doesn't go backwards. So the only way that monies go between the two funds would be like the initial setup of a fund, or in the case of projects like the park projects, we fund those projects with a one-time transfer into the fund, but after that, the money just stays in those funds. So it's important to note that just all the departments are in the operating fund, in the general fund, and then everything else has a separate purpose. So what I thought I'd do is every quarter come to you guys and kind of give you a heads up on where we think we are during the fiscal year. So we've just ended our first quarter, and there's really not much to report. If you can see, our revenues are only $756,000 for a whole year. so far, and that's because the tax revenues don't really start coming in until November or so. But the important thing to note on this slide is that we have almost $3 million worth of expenditures and only $756,000 of revenue. That's why we have to have fund balance. If we didn't have fund balance, we wouldn't be able to write paychecks. So it's really important, even though you look and say, well, we've got $11 million budget, for several months out of the year we have no cash, so we have to live off of our fund balance. Taxes, like I said, are really slow in the very beginning. We've just had minimal payments. I wanted to make sure everybody understood the language with property taxes. The property taxes that we usually say are property taxes are the real and personal property tax and the motor vehicle property tax, which are called ad valorem taxes. So that's important now that we have the municipal vehicle tax. That's totally different. That's not based on the property value of the vehicle. So this motor vehicle property tax is based on the value of every vehicle. So just got to keep those two things separate. This is our budget for fiscal year 19. It hasn't changed much from the budget in the previous year. Again, the largest department is the police department, which is typical of a town our size that has a police department. That is usually the largest department. There's a lot of different departments that are all put together in administration. That includes the clerk, finance, HR. So the next few slides, if anybody is interested, they can look at this presentation online. I'm not going to go through it. It really is difficult to see how we're doing in the beginning of a first quarter, but the information is there. And in addition, there's been a lot of interest in our budget, so what we've started doing is there is a 37-page detailed line item budget on the website now. I'll show you where that is in just a second. This is how it looks kind of summed up. Anyway, there's several pages of those. And again, this shows that we've had almost $3 million worth of expenditures so far this quarter. And the other thing is a lot of our other revenues that come from the state, there are also lags in those. Sometimes we don't get those, even though we might get July revenue, we may not get that until a little bit later. And another thing of important note is we did set up a new department called the Hurricane Recovery Department, because if we're going to apply for FEMA, the Union County has not been declared eligible yet. We're hoping that that happens, but it may not. If it does not happen, then any expenses we incur are just going to come out of our funds. But if we do get eligible to request FEMA recovery, it's really important that we account for it separately, and there are also a lot of extra loopholes that we have to do for as far as purchasing. So that's one of the reasons why the suspension bridge is not open just right away, because we have to go through a lot of different bidding. Even to cut down trees, we have to get 3 bids. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through, so that's why that stuff is taking a little bit longer, because we have to follow federal guidelines. The other thing of importance that, if you remember last year, we had to amend the budget like twice to add more money to the sanitation. So I wanted to make sure we're all watching that line so that we can determine if we have enough money in that budget. But we talked during the budget about that it costs $217 per house to provide the service. Now we have 5,936 homes. That has grown by 90 homes in just since July. So if you look at the growth that it had since 2017, we had 5,500 homes. So that's how much it has grown in less than 2 years, or in just 2 years. But if you if you calculate out the 90 homes just this quarter, and roughly it's 360 homes, that would be $78,000 increase. So we've budgeted an $85,000 increase. So if that growth stays right there, we should be okay. If it goes any higher, then we might have to come back to the board and ask for a budget increase there. But so far, it looks like our estimate is okay there. So the capital project fund is one of those funds we couldn't extract everything out of. We took as much as we could out of there, but we left Kensington Drive in this fund. This fund is not a multi-year fund. It's not, we have not passed a capital project ordinance for it yet. Whenever we get the final award contract from the CRTPO, we'll come back to the board and we'll do a budget ordinance, and we'll extract monies that have already been set aside plus the $1.8 million, and we'll set up a capital project ordinance for that. But for right now, that project's on hold, and you can see that we've only spent $1,500 this year because we're waiting for that agreement, because anything we spend between now and when that agreement's signed doesn't fall under the umbrella of the agreement and wouldn't get captured as our match. So we want to have all that money that we are going to have to spend be part of the match. So we're kind of waiting for that agreement, which hopefully will come through in November. So there are several different kinds of funds. Special revenue funds are funds that kind of have their own revenue source. They, in this case, we have the rental property fund, which is the Nivens Price building. It collects revenue. It has made a profit every year. So far, it has $205,000 of built-up fund balance. The technology fund is a fund we charge $1 for every permit that's issued in order to cover credit card fees and any other administrative fees. The police, as I said before, have some funds that are they get some shares of crime collected money after it's adjudicated. The police get a certain percent from the courts, and so that's both federal and state. They are allowed to use that for just really narrow purposes. In the state drug fund, they can use it. That $4,000 actually is drug buy money. They can use cash to do undercover work and that kind of stuff. But basically, that's very strict in what they can and can't do with that. PAL bill is our paving revenue from the state. We've gotten our first allotment, the $179,000 from the state. We get that in September and January every year. In addition to that, we have set aside this year $229,000 of fund balance so that we can do additional paving. So we've got $563,000 that we can do paving for this year. Police Explorers Fund was just a special revenue fund we set up because the kids were doing fundraisers, and when they did their fundraisers, say in April, if they made a couple $1,000s, well, if it stays in the general fund, it just falls to fund balance, and then those kids don't have access to that money the next year to buy whatever they needed to buy. So this kind of holds their money explicitly just for them to use. The Caboose Fund is my favorite fund. It's there because years ago some citizens started some fundraising, and they raised about $3,000. And whenever you give a town a donation and you say it's for a specific purpose, we can only spend it on that specific purpose. So unless we buy a caboose, we are going to hold $3,400. So you've got to be careful whenever you do a fundraiser that if the town collects that for a specific purpose, then it has to be used for that. So right now it's just sitting in a bank account making a little money. The cemetery fund we set up. we set up this year because the cemetery actually makes money every year so far. It charges for plots. It charges for getting the plot, opening and closing the graves. And usually the money made, it brings in more money than it spends. So what we thought we would do is set that money aside, because eventually we're going to run out of plots. But we have to take care of that cemetery for perpetuity. So this will start building up that fund balance so that whenever we do run out of plots, at least we'll have a little bit of a bank to start to keep the cemetery up. And then we get into the capital projects, which we have several park projects going on, as you know. Nesbitt Park has just started on the water and sewer part of that project. So it's just getting underway, and Town Creek is almost done. It doesn't look like that from the money side of it, but we're kind of holding on to one of the payments for the contractor until it's completely done. But that slide's on its ways, from what I understand. So it should be done soon. Park Master Plan. It doesn't seem like a capital project, but the reason it's in this kind of fund is because we approved it last year in the spring, and it went over a fiscal year. So if you approved a budget last year in the fiscal year and we closed the general fund, then we'd have to reappropriate it again. So this way, having it in a special fund, we set aside the $65,000. It could go, those funds stay open. They don't close. They stay open until the project's done. So that's why that one's in a separate fund. The downtown skate park was approved in July with a grant from the state legislature. It's actually the legislature allocates funding from the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So they specifically gave us that grant for the downtown skate park. So that's just now getting underway. That $47,000 is a purchase order just to get started. The TAP grant has been going on for a while, obviously, and thank you. It's a 50% matching reimbursement grant from the federal government. What reimbursement means is we have to pay the money first, and then they pay us back. So you can see there that it looks like we've gotten a lot more money than we spent, but some of that is our match. We transferred in $250,000 of Powell bill money, and we transferred $264,000 from the general fund. So both of those transfers have gone in. And we've gotten $113,000 worth of grant revenue. But with our transfers from the Powell fund being state revenue, then only $264,000 of the $1,179,000 would mean that only 35% of that project is going to be taxpayer money. The rest is state and federal money. So then we have two grants. It is confusing that they're both Waxhaw Marvin, but we've got the Waxhaw Marvin Sidewalk CDBG grant. That is a federal community development block grant. We have that through a subrecipient agreement with Union County. So Union County was the grantee, and they pretty much shared us some money. And then the Waxhaw Marvin corridor study is just about done. And that brings us to the municipal motor vehicle tax. So I just wanted to remind everybody there's a state statute that allows the town to collect that tax. It cannot exceed $30 per vehicle, but that would be $5 if you had a transit system, which we don't. So $25 per vehicle is our max. And We have gotten just a tiny bit of revenue for that, and it's mostly because in July, anybody that purchased a car would go to the DMV and that tax would have gotten added on. The way that tax is collected is June 13th, after we passed our budget, we notified the county. They already have Monroe doing that tax, so it was nothing new to them, and the DMV obviously has been doing that sort of collection, and so it got added, but there's a big lag because in, say, July, the DMV sends out bills for September. So we have not really gotten a whole month's worth of that. We budgeted $304,000, which I hope was a conservative estimate of, there's almost 13,000 cars, according to the county, in the town of Waxhaw. So we cut that back quite a bit, but we'll keep watching that and see how that comes in. Maybe September, October, when we get that from the county, we'll see if we had a good estimate or not. But we'll look at that before the engineering department starts their first project. We'll make sure that we have enough that we think we can get through this first project. I wanted also to give you an update. We talked in August about how our prior fiscal year was looking. I think that we're in pretty good shape. We passed a fund balance policy of having unassigned fund balance between 30 and 40%, and we're right there. These are the 5 categories of fund balance that you could have. There's restricted, which is an outside restriction. And in this case, the state makes us go through a calculation. Basically, for your accounts payable and anything that's unspendable, they make you set that aside, and that's what that $857,000 is. And this is just an estimate. And committed would be something that we have an agreement with someone. Non-spendable would be like if somebody had given us a donation when that caboose fund was in the general fund. That would be an example of non-spendable. Assigned is where we would have had appropriated fund balance, which we have always had every year except this year. If you have an assigned fund balance, you have to hold that in reserve. So that, not having that this year has helped helped us get to that 40% because we haven't had to reserve that. So so it's looking good. We're still in the middle of the audit. The audit did get a little bit delayed, but we are still working on that, and hopefully that will come to you as soon as they're finished. And like I said, so we've posted this report in line item detail onto the web page, and it looks like this. It's every account for every fund. So there's 21 funds out there, and every account that we have is listed. And here's where it is. If you go to the department and you click on finance, there's this little right there, monthly or quarterly budget to actual, and I put that out there now, the report you just saw. Also, the audited financial statements have always been out on the website, and the budgets as well. So, and there's also a direct link. If you look at departments, you can go directly to budgets, and it'll take you down to that budget. But anyway, that's out there in case anybody wants to look at it in more detail. That's it. Any questions?
I have a question. Do you know how many other municipalities in North Carolina have the municipal vehicle tax?
Mm-hmm. According to the state treasurer, there's 196 other towns that have adopted that motor vehicle tax.
Do you know of any other in Union County?
Monroe does it in Union County. In Mecklenburg, there are I think all 6 cities in Mecklenburg County do it.
Do you know if Monroe's doing 25 or?
I do know how much Monroe's doing 30. Yeah, Charlotte's does 30, Huntersville does 20, Matthews does 25. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Forward to the update in January.
Huh?
Look forward to the update in January. Dina Sabinsky, Park and Rec Master Plan update.
Hello. I'm going to go over a quick little update where we're at on the Park Master Plan and community gatherings that are coming up, because we're about to get into our busy seasons, as you well know. Back in April, Mr. John from Besham came and told us about the progress of the master plan and how it was going, the timeline, basically. And I just wanted to bring this back up so you understand that we're on schedule and we're really excited. So we just had, so how do you do the pointer on this bad boy?
Right hand side.
There we go. We're in September. We just went through with the Park and Rec Advisory Board. We did an update with them and got some feedback from them to help us basically get through anything that we missed or something that we had questions about, so we're better informed when we come to see y'all. That is scheduled in November for our next time to come see y'all, and to basically get your feedback and understanding, and to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then in December, no later than January, after all the feedback's back, we'll have our final master plan and ready to go for our next adventure of what we're going to do for the park system. So that's very exciting. Okay, basically going to go over some of the highlights that has been accomplished in the last couple months. Inventory's been taken care of and assessed, and with future land. We had 4 community input sessions, one set in July and one set in September. Then we had a random community survey that was sent out in August. And I've got more slides to tell you about those 2 accomplishments. Then we looked at potential community partners, some that we're already community partners in, but some extra ones that we can actually get some progress on buildings or park amenities. Then we worked with the PCR committee on establishing their goals, looking back at our previous Park and Rec plan to see where the pros and cons and where we can move forward. And then we looked at the events and programming as well. Okay, public feedback. This was really awesome because we got to actually meet citizens in our town and got to have face-to-face contact and their feedback and see what their passion was. Over 66 participants came out. Things that are very popular in Waxhaw, 12 Mile Creek, Greenway, and Nesbitt. One is 12 Mile Creek. Basically, that is, everybody can go on it. It's free. It goes all past all socioeconomic barriers. So that's one of the reasons why greenways are very popular. Nesbitt, we have a really good athletic program out there, and a lot of people are at that facility, which they're very excited about the restrooms coming up. Next, near us, it identified where they actually go in the area for other recreational amenities, and then popular things that they want to see. Adult fitness and community events. They ranked really high. When it came to activities, nature programs, and outdoor challenge courses came really high as well. And then popular amenities, again, walking, biking, fitness trails, greenways. And then different type of amenities like outdoor amphitheater and community center or multi-use spaces was also identified. Then we came to the survey. So far, we got a really good high ranking on what we're providing for the citizens at this point, but they are ready for our next adventure as well as I am. The top things that what we need to work on is actually getting the word out more. So work with communications on that and to get more signage out about programs and where the facilities are. Highlights from the survey: walking and biking trails, greenways, indoor facility, aquatics, splash pad, water park, and dog park were one of the top 5s. Then we went into programming. The adult fitness and wellness, again, ranked really high. And then social workshops like your babysitting, CPR, cooking, safety. Senior programming came up top 3, and then our outdoor adventure course. We have a very outdoor kind of families here, and then that's what they looked like they wanted to see. What was very encouraging is the strong support to improve the park system and the recreation system. To me, that means a lot, that they're ready to get their hands dirty with us and get these parks online. So I was very encouraged. Our next step,
Just out of curiosity, what was the participation rate
that one.
on the survey?
Yes, sir. We had over 600 responses back, and we only had to make a minimum of 400 for statistically valid. Next step, we're finalizing the goals and objectives with the PCR committee to help us make sure that our goals from the previous planned is either we've met those goals and ready to move forward and have realistic goals in the future. Finish up that outline for that. Then come back to the board for a review. Then we're going to have another gathering for public input in November as well. Then we'll start doing the layout of the master plan. That's setting the priorities, getting the phases. Something I know that all of it's on our mind is the funding and grant opportunities and how to develop the future parks.
What's the purpose of this second round of community conversations?
We'd like to see basically a kind of a wrap-up of all this information together and see if there's anything that sparked your curiosity through this process, especially for us to kind of see it again, to kind of see what was the input that was given back. To just, the more we have it in front of us, the better I think we're going to be informed to give our the best product in the end. So that's the reason why we're coming back. And then you can't go wrong with as much community involvement as possible. So I thought that'd be cool for us to do that. Then we'll finalize and then bring it back for the board to accept. And then we're ready.
Yeah, my only suggestion would be when you talk to us in November, maybe have a clearer outline of what the purpose of that second round of community conversations, what they are. You're going to be further along in the process. You'll have a lot of information out on the public forum, and that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So it'd be nice to be clear as to what we hope to accomplish with that. That's different from round 1 and earlier.
So maybe a quick little outline would help out.
I'm just giving you the suggestion. I'll let you come up with the solution.
So that second resident round is not, the intention is not to change the process we've already done
We've
in
already
the
done the
survey.
process. Yeah, that's all right. It's basically to see if there's anything else that we've forgotten or if something else sparked your curiosity. Just to give as much input as possible.
Well, and I think the thing there is, so if the feedback is we need more trails, then there's additional opportunity to say, well, where do we need more trails? So there's a continued dialogue with the community about what the survey says. And then in addition to that, the comments that the 60-plus people gave that might not dovetail with the survey. So that's additional information for the board and the planning or Parks and Rec committee to look at, just to try to integrate all that information as the final work product, because the survey on its own, again, is not a popularity contest as to 1, 2, and 3 are necessarily what you would do in that order. There may be certainly financial constraints, land constraints, a lot of different constraints where item number 4 might be what the board settles on as this is what we're doing first. So it's really that continued dialogue.
Any questions about the update on the master plan? Awesome sauce. I'm going to go into our community update. Okay, so Autumn Treasures and the Grillin' and Chillin' is about to take over downtown Waxhaw. So Friday, part of McDonald Street and the gravel area behind Niven's Price is going to be blocked off to get in all of our barbecue cookers. So just to be aware of that, signs went up today to remind our businesses, and we've already made extra parking in other places for those businesses that are affected. So they're good to go. On the website, we also have a new parking map. So I can encourage citizens to go look at that. We added another trolley, so now we have 2 trolleys going on. I would encourage to use those trolleys. That way you're not having to circle a couple times downtown. They're there for your convenience. So Friday night we are having a concert. The Shelley Ruffin Soul Revival Band is going to be near the brewery. So that part of the street's going to be blocked off. We're adding food trucks this year to help provide for our citizens. And then we are up and at 'em early on Saturday morning. There's lots of activities. There's a pancake breakfast happening that morning. And then we also are getting in our vendors and ready for the event start at 10. We're going a little bit later this year to 6. That was one of our requests from vendors to try to get some more action going on there. Then we wrap up for tonight. Start again at 12 on Sunday with the barbecue. Let me go back. The barbecue tasting is at 1:30 on Saturday, so I'd encourage everybody to come out and to enjoy that. And it just smells really good down there on Friday night, so it's really a nice time. On Sunday, where the barbecue vacates, we're actually having a horseback buggy during that area. And then of all the kids' activities around that area, that McDonald and Church as well. Then we have about a week off, and we transform downtown Waxhaw again to Fright Night. It's our Halloween event, which is really cool, and we all get dressed up, have lots of fun, and have activities, bands, costume contests. Encourage the whole family to deck out and get costumed together, and it's just an awesome time. We have a haunted house in the park, which we have volunteers running it. So it's really cool. The kids have a great time, and it's just a great family event. And then our next senior coffee is the 1st, and we're having, this is a health and fitness. We're talking about nutrition at this event. and just remind our seniors to sign up ahead of time. Any questions about events coming up this month?
Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Kurt White, Urban Land Institute, Technical Assistance Panel.
Good evening. Okay, so tonight we'll have a chance to go over just the preliminary findings and recommendations that came out of the Urban Land Institute's Technical Assistance Panel that we held in downtown Waxhaw last Monday and Tuesday. But before we do that, I thought it'd be important just to bring everyone up to speed, and then also because we're fortunate we're in a public setting right now, I thought it'd be good to just go through a little bit of additional information about ULI and some of the study background before we get into the more specifics about the scope and process and findings. And I do want to emphasize that when we talk about the findings, these are just initial findings that came out of that day and a half that they spent with us. So this is going to be really the opening of a couple-month process here. But just a review of who Urban Land Institute ULI is. They're basically the land use and real estate development think tank. I like to think of them kind of best practices organization. And as part of their service and kind of give back to the community, they provide these technical assistance panels where they assemble a panel of volunteers from different parts of the land use and real estate industries to help assist communities like ours, and especially in our area, with questions that we pose to them. Our panel was we were really happy with our panel. They were really specifically matched to our project based on the skills of the panelists. So in advance of the panel, we told them what our problem statement was, and they made sure that they gave us a group of folks who would be best equipped to help us through that process. So you see here, you got McAdams and Stantec, and so you have your private kind of urban design and engineering and Horn firms. And then you also have your public sector, city planners, some developers as well, and so good mix of public-private sector with a variety of backgrounds. And if anyone followed what has happened in downtown Kannapolis over the past year or two, or several years actually, but it's really ramping up now. They've certainly taken some really bold steps in some interesting public-private partnerships there. So it was great to have Zach going on board. I wanted to share a little bit about the background too, just review more how we got to where we were going to be using the Urban Land Institute. And I think it's important to rehash this because I think knowing more about the background since 2012 will help us walk through the findings and recommendations. In 2012, this community decided that and really identified downtown Waxhaw as the heart of the Waxhaw community and the most significant cultural resource in the area. That comes from the Downtown Vision Plan. And there was 6 bullet points, 6 approaches that were called out to help both achieve that more fully realize that vision. And when I started going through this, I was really encouraged actually, and I think everyone should be, that we've made great strides in all 6 of these areas. If you look at mobility, you've got things like the TAP grant with sidewalk improvements. study, it was the town of Waxhaw requested assistance identifying the highest and best use for what we call the core parcels. And you'll see what those are. We'll zoom in a second, but it's basically the Niven Price building and the parking lot behind it. Dunkin' McDonald, water tower, and the community corner there at West North Main and Broome Street. But also taking into account all the parcels that the town is in control of downtown, whether it's the Horton property, the Barnes Park, or even our Parks and Rec building. We wanted to make a roadmap to see how do we look at this kind of as a chessboard and not do one-off things here and there that would preclude a greater, a project that could have a greater impact if it were done in concert. Here's another, just a closer view of what we call those core properties. These are really the dead center of the downtown, and the town controls all of it right now. It's a little more specific about what the scope was. We asked some very, very direct questions to the Urban Land Institute panel. We said, how should the town leverage the Niven Price building for downtown economic development? Do we continue doing what we're doing? Leasing it out, and we have our rental property fund. Does the town divest itself of the building back to the private sector? And if so, how do you do that with a historic building, with a building the facade certainly not to the historic look that it once was? So how do you step through that in a way that maintains what's really a very special building and do that in a way that kind of achieves our goals? So then the parking lot, of course. We know that parking is becoming more strained downtown. We are fortunate that we have a public parking lot right on, just behind Main Street right now. So certainly don't want to overlook the importance of that as we start through this process. Sit in space. Again, back to Dina was here right before me. We know that our events happen. Most of them happen downtown. We know that they're becoming ever more popular, and we know that we've heard from the community that gathering spaces are very important, and not just from residents and visitors, but from our business owners who also see the value in having centralized gathering spaces downtown. We also know that we're in a leased building right now for our town hall, and there'll inevitably have to be conversations about a facility in the coming years. And then what opportunities for public-private partnerships might we consider? So that we don't have to do it all just on the town. We can really get some more impactful and maybe larger scale projects by partnerships. And so we wanted to make sure that was considered as well. So those are the study questions that were asked. How we actually went about answering the questions, or how the ULI is going to help us do that. In advance of the panel, we provided a briefing book. They received a month in advance more information than you would ever want to know. It was market studies about downtown Waxhaw, housing data, parcel maps, utilities reports. They became very acquainted with downtown Waxhaw, also our area plans. So we actually then identified some stakeholders to be interviewed for the process. So staff actually invited folks from downtown to come and be a part of this process. And we made an effort to really be inclusive of different backgrounds. We had long-term downtown business owners, relatively new downtown business owners. We had property owners downtown, real estate brokers, developers, town staff as well, for some invaluable perspective that long-term staff was able to provide. So we really had set it up nicely, and then really the first all day on about a day and a half on the first and the second, really doing a deep dive, and then ULI actually kicked us out and did a closed working session for the second half of the second day, because they wanted to make sure that no one was, staff wasn't putting our mark on it and having undue influence on it. They really tried to take an unbiased approach. So what were the initial findings? So I just want to stress again that these are just these have not been resent out to staff. This is going to be an iterative process over the next month or so as this report is prepared. But on that day, at the end of the day, they presented their initial findings, and they did that in the form of guiding principles first, and then actual some specific recommendations. Guiding principles, of course, enhancing downtown as a destination. I think we've all that's been a running theme. Promote daytime activity. What they heard from the business owners, and folks, was that there's still not enough daytime sustainable commerce downtown on a weekday basis. Preserve the historic character, of course, though, whatever you do. Consistent takeaway from the stakeholders and from the panel was to return town-owned property where appropriate to private use. Prioritize parking as you do that, and also throughout the downtown as you find opportunities to continue to improve parking. Make every effort to do that. Expand open space, or gathering spaces where we can. And then look at prioritize implementation, or look at it as a phased approach. So I think that the mayor may have mentioned it, or the manager in the previous presentation, that if there's item 1, 2, 3, 4 on the list, it doesn't mean you have to do all 4 of them at once. It doesn't mean you have to do any of them, but it could mean you start with number 4 based on funding constraints and just the realities, timing, development, and it makes sense at the time. So, phased approach. As far as the initial more specific recommendations, they did recommend returning the Niven Price building to the private sector through an RFP, RFQ process. They did recommend retaining ownership of and enhancing the existing Niven Price gravel parking lot, so that they strongly recommended that the town keep control of the parking that we have control over to a public benefit, for a public benefit. They asked us to consider a multi-story building on the corner lot at West North Main and Broome Street with parking and an event space behind. They call it sort of a gateway parcel. So this is the water tower / community lot there. Not the water tower itself, but the gravel lot. And so to look at that, that guided people's concerns for more daytime activity downtown, more sustainable commerce, tax base imbalance concerns. So continue to seek more parking opportunities as we've done thus far with shared agreements where appropriate. Consider utilizing East North Main Street as a civic space. We know that right now in the TAP grant, we're designing in a expansion of those sidewalks. Could that be enhanced even further to make it to start feeling less like a street and more like a community space, while still functioning as both? And then identify key parcels for future development. So there are other parcels that the town might not necessarily own right now. We don't want to overlook opportunities along the periphery of the downtown where we might need to have conversations, not necessarily to acquire or not these parcels, but just to say, hey, if we do this kind of development at this location, what impact is that going to have? Or if this parcel develops in this kind of a way on the periphery of our downtown, what's that going to do to downtown? So we just need to make sure we're keeping that in our minds. So the final report will be provided in the next 60 days. They'll be validating some of their assumptions and some more details with us, with staff, and then there'll be a final presentation to the commissioners at a later date, and then we'll have to look at how we prioritize these recommendations and what might we want to implement. Any questions?
One, with parking, I know partnerships and so forth are great. Are there any other specifics that were suggested on things that perhaps we own now that could be better utilized, such as right-of-ways along streets and so forth?
That's a great question. There was talk as well about, hey, if there's on-street parking opportunities. A lot of those details will be shared in the final report, but yeah, that's definitely something as well. We have the opportunity to look at on-street, for example.
Street, perhaps some two-way streets becoming one-way and giving you opportunities for increased parking along a one-way street rather than a two-way street. Were those discussed also?
I don't recall that specific one, but we'll look at the final.
Commissioner Lee?
You said that one of their initial recommendations was to divest from the Niven Price building. Did they have a recommendation yet on whether or not we should spend money refurbishing it before going through an RFP process, or as is? Did they have a preference?
That, we did discuss kind of the either or on that. I don't think we've landed on a final, or they've landed on a final yet, simply because they haven't gotten back to staff with our thoughts on that. So that'll be in the final report.
Okay, that would definitely be something for us as a board to consider, especially tonight with asking for facades. We may want to wait on to decide that till we find out what Urban Land thinks we should do with the Niven Price building, because that might be where we need to use our money, or it might not.
Well, just as a side note on that, we, as staff, have not applied to the facade program on behalf of the town because of the fact that the ULI study was in process, and secondarily because we do have an offer that's still active pending on the potential sale of the building. And one of the early discussion issues there has gotten exactly to that point, which is it better for the town to restore a facade to match two other facades that have been changed many times over the years, or is it better to make a final decision on the sale of property and then allow that discussion with the developer to really drive what the answer is? Because depending on the use of the buildings, the facade that is on the two left-hand sides might not be appropriate and would likely have to be changed out. So we did go and get a preliminary estimate for matching the two that are on the left, and it was about a $45,000 cost. But we absolutely have put that on the shelf until the board has adequate time to really come to a final decision on disposition of the property and that process, and then really probably incorporate a discussion with any potential development partner about the business points of, would the town do that? What benefit might that be? Or really is that part of a development agreement as a condition for the town to say, we will sell the property, but here are two or three of the conditions, and one of which would be the developer must restore the facade and the developer must provide an appropriate context-sensitive, historic-sensitive proposal that meets their development and market needs without us kind of getting into it. So I think Kurt's having ongoing conversations. The panel saw that we'd gotten the bid and they thought that's great. One thing, it would be nice to have the building match, but depending upon where they land at the final answer, I think the staff's recommendation right now is that we hold off and get to the final answer on the development agreement approach and who that developer might be and all that before we would come back with a recommendation on applying. So that really starts pushing the time frame back, and we, from the staff standpoint, feel like we're really not in a position to make an either-or decision yet, because even if there is a sales agreement to a developer, there will be a number of due diligence items that will have to get done. So if the answer was the town needed to apply, we could do that out of the next year's allocation.
Okay.
Or we could use the balance of what would be left after the discussion tonight. And so roughly half of the fund this year would still be left.
Okay.
And so that would provide the board flexibility to structure payments or do a variety of things. So we really don't feel like the two programs and objectives are in conflict with each other.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Kurt, would you mind emailing that to the board, your presentation? Thank you.
And this might seem excessive, but is there any way I could get one of those briefing books? I'd like to read all the multitude of information.
Sure.
Thanks. I'm that big of a nerd.
I'll have this shared to you in Dropbox.
That's okay.
So just a curiosity question. I know as part of our transparency effort, we're putting everything out online. Wouldn't these two things go out there? I mean,
Yeah, as Kurt noted,
it's big.
it's big.
Yeah.
They'll
It'll
be added to
be
the
a-
agenda.
Okay. I just know staff's making a very concerted effort to get anything and everything that's a public record out online. And this would seem logical to me.
That'd be wonderful.
As part of this, I mean, one of the things that we didn't touch, Niven's Price, is separate the parking, the building, and all that stuff. When do you see us actually going out and getting an appraised value of the different variations of that?
So-
Is that
so-
part of this project, or?
I think that's going to be part of the process moving forward. As Kurt indicated, I think they are going to recommend that the town consider selling the building, not the parking lot, but the building. They will recommend that we use a process to open it up to all who are interested. So that's a request for qualification, request for proposal, or some variation on that. We believe probably the request for qualifications might be the approach we would take. So any developer is interested, are you qualified and do you have the capabilities? And then maybe on the selection, we get into the business points, and the first order of business, we believe, is going to be fairly soon getting into an appraised value, because under the developer agreement, as Mr. Buckley shared earlier, we can't sell the property for less than what it appraises for. And then that has to be disclosed in a public hearing and any other business points and what the town is agreeing to, and then what the developer is going to do under the development agreement. So we do need to talk on the legal side about the timing of the appraisal and when we do that, but that step probably needs to be done in the near future. And the good news is the building fund there can support the cost of the appraisal, and that's not a problem.
Other questions?
Yeah, where the corner lot, the linear park property, are they suggesting dividing that property, selling for you're saying a multi-story building on the corner, but then parking and event space behind? So are they suggesting to divide, like sell the front part and then the town keep the back part?
I think they got to that level of specificity in the initial report that they gave that over last Tuesday. There was certainly, they did acknowledge that if a building went up there, then you'd have to find a way to park people. And what they did say was that the parking behind a proposed building could be flexible to accommodate events when there wasn't, when needed. So to do it in a way that could kind of be both. But all those details weren't.
I think to get to an actionable item that could be done sooner than later is the possibility of angled parking on Church Street, North Church Street, on the property that is owned by the town. And so there are there's gravel parking. I'm sorry, there's grass parking that's going on the weekend right now in a parallel parking attempt. I'll just say it that way. That could be transitioned to angled parking and pick up more spaces. And so we at the staff level are really investigating the cost of that, the timing of that, but we believe that that's something that can be done fairly quickly because we control the property. The street's fairly wide right there, and there's a lot of grass, but it would include some drainage piping and of course gravel and pavement, but that likely could be done fairly quickly. That also could be done with the Niven Price rental fund because it supports the parking that would utilize the building. So that really is one of the first, I think, quick takeaways that we can implement fairly quickly and add parking in the downtown.
Any other questions? Thank you, Kurt.
Can we take a short break? 2 minutes?
Sure, we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess and be back at it at 7:45.
a high-end meat and potatoes place. It was good.
Come on, Fred. Okay, we'll resume here. Next item is a public hearing on Thoroughfare Protection Overlay District text amendment, petition TA 007762, 2018, and presenting will be Alex Beestings. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Alex?
Hello, everyone. So this is a request by Todd Harrison to amend Section 6.4, the Thoroughfare Protection Overlay District of the UDO by modifying lot width requirements. So this is a screenshot of the UDO as it reads right now of the purpose of the Thoroughfare Protection Overlay District, that is to provide for the protection and preservation of thoroughfare streets to avoid undue congestion and significant deterioration of service levels, and it applies to properties located along Highway 16. So the existing UDO language for lot width requirements states that the minimum lot width of all lots located wholly or in part within the Thoroughfare Protection Overlay District shall be 150 feet. And the applicant is proposing the additional text which reads in red that will go on to say, with the exception of all new lots, parcels, or divisions of land that are provided access to the thoroughfare by means of a subdivision street or an entrance. So I wanted to illustrate what that actually means and what the implications of that is. So this is a screenshot of our lot development regulations in our UDO right now for all of the zoning districts that we have. And I highlighted the lot width line. So I'm going to use R4 as an example, and you'll see that the lot width requirement for R4 is 60 feet. So if you had 300 feet of property, you could theoretically have it 60-foot width lots. And that means 5 points of access onto 16. So the thoroughfare said, we want to reduce congestion and improve levels of service because every driveway is a potential conflict point. Someone turns out that slows down coming traffic. So instead, that same 300 feet can only be developed to 2 150-foot lots. And you see those 2 access points, direct access. So again, the proposed language says that it gives an exception that states that if it's provided access by means of a subdivision street or an entrance, it doesn't need to be 150 feet. It would go to the underlying zoning district. So instead, that same 300 feet could be developed to 5 60-foot lots, but instead you're using an internal street network and being served by subdivision entrance. So instead, there's 1 point of access onto 16 because no lots are getting immediate access. So with that, staff recommends approval of the text amendment to allow lot widths to be that of the underlying zoning district if it provided access through a primary subdivision street, as it avoids undue congestion and significant deterioration, which are the purposes of the Thoroughfare Protection Overlay District. At a special meeting held on September 24th, the Planning Board voted unanimously to send a favorable recommendation to the Board, both on the text amendment and the reasonableness and consistency statement. So with that, this is the public hearing, but in the future meeting, the motions will be here, and then the reasonableness and consistency statement.
Any questions for Alex?
Comment? I think this is a very good idea that's been floating around for a long time, so thanks for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Alex. See you in a couple weeks. Okay, new business. We have a series of facade grant improvements, our actions, potential actions. And we'll do them in the sequence presented. So first item up, action on facade improvement grant requests at 515 King Street. And presenting will be Lindsay Small.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Again, I'm Lindsay Small, and we have a few facade improvement grant requests before us tonight. Just as a little bit of a brief overview, this is somewhat of a refresher from the meeting that you had in the end of April regarding the program and its changes at large, but you know, a facade, as Greg was alluding to earlier, is one side of the building on the exterior. With regard to the program, non-residential structures as well as residential structures, provided that they're in the historic period of significance, are eligible. And for something to be eligible as part of the program, it must comply with the program guidelines, which are in your executive summary packet. Further, to be able to move forward with the work, as part of the program, approval is needed prior to the beginning of the work, and they must adhere to the historic landmark guidelines. Just a little bit of a process overview and refresher tonight. We are requesting to do the Board of Commissioner decision, so these applicants have already had their pre-submittal meeting, staff's reviewed it as well. The Historic Preservation Commission has made their recommendations, and then if a decision is granted tonight, then work would be able to begin. As part of the program, 2 quotes must be provided for each of the pieces of facade work that are to begin. The facade grant program grants up to 50% of the matching value of the actual cost of rehabilitation. So with that being said, the applicants are required to provide the actual quote of what the work was. Sometimes there's some differentiation between what was bidded at the beginning and what the end result is. And applications were received, which we'll hear tonight, for 3 structures that are in compliance with the Facade Improvement Grant Program for all 4 of their facades, which means there are a total of 12 facade application requests. 4 were for 515 King Street, which was a residence. 4 were for 120 West North Main Street, which is currently serving as the Masonic Lodge, and 4 were for 409 King Street, which is also a residence. Here you'll just see a little bit, kind of hard to see in this slide, but you'll see a little map overview of where the 3 structures are located. I'll try to use the clicker here. Can't do it as well as Mr. Gregg, but suffice it to say, they're outlined in yellow with those little dots there, just for a little context. And with that, I'll just open up with discussing 515 and its facade requests a little bit more specifically. So this is a residential structure, as mentioned. This was built in 1915, so it's within that historic period of significance, which falls between 1888 and 1941. Again, this is a request for work on all 4 facades, specifically for the removal of rotted wood siding, to replace weather wrap where it's needed. They're also requesting to install some wood siding, which would help it to match the existing siding, and a little bit of cleaning and exterior painting. There was also a request for the addition of gutters on the structure. Specifically on the front facade, they wanted to do some waste removal with some dumpster addition, and on the back rear facade, they wanted to remove some rotted window sash. So there's a few pictures there, which are also in your staff report. This is just a little graphic of what the quote comparison was between the 2 bids that were required without the addition of gutters. And then, as alluded to earlier, there has been an addendum to request gutters on the structure. So since the Historic Preservation Commission had their meeting in July, that request has been added to the submittal, which would include the cost of gutters. So that's kind of outlined a little bit more in your packet of how that would make a difference in terms of the quotes and the figures for that. And with that, staff recommends approval of all of these 4 grant applications as presented for all 4 facades, and I'm available if you have any questions with regard to that. The request would be that we would make a motion on each of the 4 facades separately, just for clarification. And here are the historic preservation recommendations for context.
Questions?
Yes.
Discussion?
Both. The first is a question, did this applicant and the other 2 meet the requirements of our policy for the facade grants? Fully meet it, okay.
Yes, so that all of the facade applications for those.
We have a policy, they applied for it, they followed the policy, and they did exactly as they're supposed to do.
Correct.
Okay. Personally, I have a problem with residential buildings in this, but that's the policy, so that's just a personal feeling, not that of the board. I would like to ask perhaps in the future, in the not too distant future, we as a board have a discussion on perhaps a revision to the policy. I mean, my personal feeling again is that I like to know that for a cost-benefit analysis, giving the grant is an investment by the town in the town. What is the direct benefit to the town by spending money at 515 King Street? I can see personally, again, the Masonic Building is there for the parades, it's there for the, jamming at the tracks, it's there for Oktoberfest, it's there for the spring art kaleidoscope. It is a commercial in nature, and I was a part of the Historic Preservation Commission when it first started out, and Terry Settle can probably tell me, but I think the first budget was $750. And then it grew, and it grew, and it grew. But it was all commercial. Personal feeling, again, I think it's gotten too big without the board really examining what it should be. But they did follow the rules and procedures, so.
Correct. This was in compliance with the process.
Other discussion?
I have a question about the gutters. Is that a common thing with the qualifications with the,
Sure. So with regard to the gutter specifically, and I know we were talking about how that was
Yeah.
a later addition.
I've never heard of that coming through before, someone wanting reimbursement for gutters.
Yeah, we do have another series of facades that we're hearing tonight that also include gutters, and staff was of the opinion that that would help to support the structure and it would still be in compliance with the program, because it'd be on the exterior, provide additional support for maintaining the property.
Other comments? Commissioner Burrow?
Just to follow up to Commissioner Burns, what is the style of gutters that they intend to use? Is it the half-round gutter, or is it an OG-type gutter? And the design criteria, even in your presentation, talks about the half-round.
Yeah, I know we had a little bit of conversation at the meeting, and as Lisa McCarter was saying, I think that those are half-round gutters that they ended up requesting in the subsequent addendum.
That, again, is in accordance with the design guidelines. They're specific.
That would meet the intention of protecting the exterior facade.
Any other questions, Commissioner Westlake?
Probably should have studied the policy a little bit more. If you could just explain in more detail to me. So is the purpose of this just to have the material fit a certain criteria, or do we normally include the labor, pressure washing, painting, all of that? Is that all normally part of?
So as a point of clarification, as Mayor Maher was saying, when we asked for these two quotes, that's kind of a full scope of both the materials and the time that it would take to be able to execute the work. That's generally why we see some differentiation between the two quotes historically, because just estimating different labor and things of that nature. That's pretty common.
Any other questions, additional? What would we like to do with this one? This is King Street, and there's 4 motions to either approve as presented, approve with modification, or a motion to deny.
I will go ahead and make the 4 motions for approval, given that the applicants and our staff followed the rules and procedures as they're supposed to. And I think it would be wrong on our parts to deny something that's been done properly.
So if you would go to, I'm not sure which page in the, page 12 in the deck, or is it up on the screen?
Yeah, I did each 4 motions on 4 separate slides for clarification in case there was any.
Great, okay.
So we'll just start with the front facade, if that's okay.
So I make the motion to approve FIP 007566-2018 for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of the work, not to exceed $4,098.32.
We have a motion for FIP 007566. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying and raising your hand, right hand. say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Continue.
Okay. Make the motion to approve FIP 007567-2018 for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work not to exceed $2,878.01.
So we have a motion to approve FIP 007567. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have 5-0. Next up.
Make the motion to approve FIP 007568-2018 for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work not to exceed $1,788.34.
So we have a motion to adopt FIP 007568. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it.
Make the motion to approve FIP 007569-2018 for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of the work not to exceed $2,089.39.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt FIP 007569, the last one for King Street, or 515 King Street. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And with that, we'll conclude the hearing for 515 King Street. Our next request, as mentioned, is for 120 West North Main Street, which is Masonic Lodge. This is a request for all 4 facades as well. Just as a little bit of context, this was, as Commissioner Burrows said, a commercial structure, so this was constructed in 1900. It's currently operated by the Masonic Lodge, and as mentioned, non-residential structures are still eligible for funding. The proposed scope of work mainly includes removing of old mortar and replacing with new mortar on all 4 facade sides of the building. This is just a comparison of the quotes as outlined in your staff report, just for a little bit of context. As you can see, they're fairly close. And with that being said, planning staff does recommend approval of the facade grants for all 4 facades for this project. Here is just a little bit more context about the recommendations that were done at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. These were also favorable recommendations with specific information for the facades. And as always, I'm here if you have any questions.
Any questions? Any discussion? Any motions?
I'll make the motions, but a comment. I walked by there a couple of times just to look at it, and it really does need the point-up work, and it really is a focal point downtown, and it's going to be even more of a focal point now that the planning board is looking at the patio for Mary O'Neill's. So, good. First motion to approve FIP 007563-2018 right facade for grant funding up to 50% of actual cost of work not to exceed $4,003.
We have a motion to approve FIP 007563. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The next request is for the left facade.
Make the motion to approve FIP 007663-2018 left facade for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of the
Didn't we just do 6-3?
Yeah, so just as a little bit of context, the facade program is currently, as you guys know, in a period of transition, so we're working on a protocol with how best to capture the processing for that. So as these all came in different intervals, some of them were just processed a little bit differently. So this is all, they did 4 separate applications for all of the facades, so even though it has the same number, there were separate applications for all facades. Would just specify, as Commissioner Fred has done, that it's a different facade.
Okay. The last 4 were the same, all the same number. So.
Oh, actually, they weren't. That's why I was
Okay.
asking the question.
Yeah.
007563-2018 left facade for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of the work not to exceed $1,500.
So we have a motion to adopt FIP 007563 left. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion to approve FIP 007564-2018 for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of the work, not to exceed $3,503.07.
We have a motion to adopt FIP 007564. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Motion to approve FIP 007565-2018 for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work, not to exceed $2,503.
We have a motion to adopt FIP 007565. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, and with that, we'll conclude the hearing for the Masonic Lodge. The last request is for a residential structure located at 409 King Street for all 4 facades. As a bit of context, this residential property was constructed in 1900, again falling within that period of historical significance. Again, this request is for all 4 facade sides. The specific proposed scope of work is going to be for the installation of a front and rear gutter, as well as for some painting on the exterior on all the facades, and for the addition of some lower level storm windows. Those are just some graphics for your reference there. This is also just a graphic here of the comparison of the proposed quotes for context.
Question. I think I read it in your report that the storm windows are interior. Is that correct?
That was what the applicant communicated, correct?
That again is in line with our design guidelines.
As a point of clarification with regard to those windows, it was the request of the WHPC at that time, which I'll just pull up here going forward a little bit, that they had asked essentially if it was possible for the windows to be exterior. So there was some discussion about that. While the windows do support the structure, generally we see them done as exterior.
So their recommendation was to only support that they replace exterior.
I don't support that. The design guidelines, they are interior or exterior.
They showed them exterior, but they said that they would only fund them if they put them interior.
I agree with that. So they are going to be interior storm windows.
The applicant communicated that they would be in support of that, and they were there when that was added to the motion.
Good, thank you.
So that was, after they had submitted the application. With that being said, and with that point of clarification, planning staff does recommend the approval of these grant applications as discussed for all 4 facades. As we were just discussing, these were the recommendations for the Historic Preservation Commission. Again, there was a lot of discussion about the windows, so an amendment was put in there with regard to that on the front facade, and the WHPC did support these requests in their recommendation to you tonight. And since staff is in support of these, our requested action would be for recommendation of approval on these 4 facades.
Okay. Motion to approve FIP 007561-2018 front facade for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work, not to exceed $2,311.99.
So we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The next request was for the rear facade.
Motion to approve FIP 007561-2018 rear facade for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work, not to exceed $2,415.31.
Motion on the table for the second facade. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Your next request was for the right facade.
Motion to approve FIP 007561-2018 right facade for for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work not to exceed $920.09.
We have a motion on the table to approve the right facade grant. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And their last request was for the left facade.
Motion to approve FIP 007561-2018 left facade for grant funding up to 50% of the actual cost of work not to exceed $1,501.40.
We have a motion on the table for the left facade. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. 5-0. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Okay, time to bring Lisa White back up for discussion on proposed ordinance specifically authorizing the use of cash disbursements.
Again, so petty cash is just a little usually very small amount of money that towns and even businesses use to pay for small purchases. And I think most towns have always used those, but in 2015, the state actually passed a statute authorizing petty cash, but only if the town passed an ordinance, which our town has not done yet, so that's what this is for, is to pass an ordinance to authorize the use of petty cash. We currently use petty cash. The town hall has $50 in petty cash, and Parks and Rec has $100. If somebody has to run to the hardware store, pay something out of their own pocket, $5.50, and they can come back and bring me the receipt, and I give them the $5.50, and then I record the expense into the ledger. But basically, petty cash is only to be used for very minor purposes, and where it's not practical to go write a check for that item.
Okay, any questions for Lisa? Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the ordinance specifically authorizing the use of cash disbursement.
So we have a motion to adopt ordinance 2018-025. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Stay here.
Next.
The next item is to approve a capital project grant ordinance to establish a multi-year fund to fund the UNCC grant that the police department got to upgrade their simulator. UNCC is doing a study, and they're going to use our officers and some of our citizens as part of that study. So there's whenever they got the first estimate, their estimate was $21,144, and that was what the grant was approved for. But whenever we went to get the actual price of the upgrade, it was $21,200. So there's $56 that needs to come from the general fund on that. But the other interesting thing is that when that upgrade gets put in a few weeks, the Police Citizens Academy is going to get to be some of the guinea pigs on that, so that's kind of exciting. So they're going to get to shoot. Bonnie's looking forward to that.
So was that to sell us on it, or?
Well, they're all for it. So.
Any discussion? Motions?
Can I make a motion to approve the capital grant project ordinance 2018026, establishing a multi-year capital grant project fund with the budget appropriation of $21,200?
There'll be a motion on the table to approve the capital project ordinance 2018026. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then the agreement part, do you want to?
Oh, that's just to approve the agreement between the university and the town because we are a subrecipient of their grant. Again, they're getting the federal grant, and then they're passing a portion on it onto us, and that's just to approve for us to sign the agreement.
So, who would like to make the motion to approve an agreement, the agreement between the two organizations?
Motion to approve an agreement made by and between UNCC and the town of Waxhaw for subrecipient grant funding.
We have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
One more.
Next item is a budget amendment to establish a restricted fund for building inspections. So the state has always required that any revenues that are collected for building inspections be spent specifically on the building inspection department, but during the this last round, the budget bill by the state specifically required reporting. They weren't clear as to how that reporting was to happen, but then the treasurer's office later came out with that we are going to report annually every year on our annual AFR all revenues and expenditures for the building inspections. So in order to make that reporting easier and to be very transparent about where the money is going, we'd like to set up a separate fund. So basically it's going to extract the revenues and the expenditures out of the general fund. So that's going to lower our general fund budget, and it's going to put that budget into a special fund just for building inspections.
And we need to do this to accommodate the law. That's probably the most important thing.
So we can report correctly. And
discussion? Who wants to make the motion?
I make a motion to approve the establishment of the Building Inspection Fund and to adopt the budget for the fund.
Any further discussion on the motion as presented? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Let's have 5. Okay. We have nobody signed up. Thank you, Lisa. We have nobody signed up for public comments, and we're on the home stretch. At the reports, at the last work session, I was asked to do a quick assessment of the board commission appointment process and report back to the board. I surveyed the applicants. 60% of them responded. All of them thought the process they were very favorable. They liked the round robin interview style. They all would have liked to have talked a little bit longer with us, which was kind of interesting. It ranged from give us 1 more minute to 4 more minutes, and I don't know what was magical about it, but that's what they shared back. And only one responded. They would have preferred a full board interview approach. By and large, everybody was like the round robin. The one concern was the time lag from application to being interviewed. And that's something that we can work on for the next time, and send some reminders out in terms of context, because there was a lot, for one of them there was a lag of 9 months, and so they were a little bit confused. So overall, very positive. From the board side, thank you all for responding. You all thought the application and interview and appointment process was professional. You felt it showed commitment to the committees by the BOC. You felt it humanized both the applicants and the BOC members. I kind of enjoyed that comment. All thought the process of the BOC choosing the candidates is more appropriate than an OAB. And then from the clerk's office, they thought the process went very, very good. Actually, Kelly's comment was, I was surprised at how effective the process was and how positive it was with the candidates. My only suggestion after listening to all of you and the candidates, that at some point in time in the January-February timeframe, one of the board members works with the deputy clerk's office to make any subtle changes we need to make on the process. Use of tool, work plans, one of the things the staff uses, iCompass. We all wanted a hard copy book, that created duplicate work. Whatever the resolution is there, we should solve that. So the real question is, what do we do with the OAB since it's a suspended committee? I remind everybody that it came out of small town Main Street when Waxhaw became, as Kurt alluded to earlier, became a full Main Street designation, it was passed on to organize the volunteer side of the town. It was left in place and structured to support the entire town. We've matured, and everybody's input is, and if the consensus still holds, I strongly suggest we terminate the OAB and have the necessary action presented in the consent agenda at a very near future BOC meeting. That's based upon all the input. That's my recommendation. So
I agree.
I agree.
3 nods and 2 agrees. So that means 5 agrees. So I'll take it. And Greg, can you have somebody, staff, prepare the necessary motion to have that taken care of? Okay. Just a couple other report outs. I had the opportunity to attend a seminar hosted by South Piedmont. Interestingly enough, it was entitled Incivility and Political Discussion. What can we do about it? The guest speaker was Dr. Carolyn Lukenmeyer, who's the executive director of the National Institute for Civil Discourse. I bring it up because she presented the actual facts and data that they've been using and gathering around the country. And I think a lot of this applies to Waxhaw, so it's really causing me to, the region, I should say, and nothing presented lead me to believe otherwise. 76% of the public now believe that incivility is a crisis in America. 83% of the public say that incivility or bullying is leading to the intolerance of free speech. And it doesn't matter if you are from the greatest generation, a baby boomer, a Gen X, or a millennial. More than half of each of those populations feel incivility has America at its lowest point that they can remember. And the range was very tight. The lowest was 57%, the highest was 60%. And it really hits home to me because I talk to my dad who's 95 every day, and he agreed with it. And you think about a 95-year-old man who's been through World War II, Vietnam, Korea War, all of that, and he just readily said, yep, this is the lowest point. That really kind of struck me, and it gives us an opportunity to think about it. I bring it up because it's prevalent, and as the tools become available, I ask South Piedmont, I ask Wingate University, make them available to us, and we'll be guinea pigs to try to see what we can do to elevate the game in Western Union County. I say it because we have a number of tough issues in front of us. With the census in 2020, we'll face statutory obligations based upon our size. Over the next 25 years, I was sitting down and talking with Greg about this. When you think about the full blowout of the Waxhaw Parkway, 16, and the 50 to 60 miles of our roads that we have, we'll face in the next 25 years replacements and improvements that total $250 million in money. That's $250 million. That's not going to happen easily. There's a desire, as you heard from Dina, for an operational and fully built-out parks and rec system. None of this will be solved without good, solid dialogue and conversation leading to consensus on what is best for Waxhaw. And here was the interesting thing, because I talked with her afterwards. The good news, and I'll point to Officer Brad back there, we can take solace in the fact we have an excellent example of how it can work right here in Waxhaw. The properly invested money in the multi-year effort of Chief and the team of community policing is one of those that, when done right, like our police force and police department do, is one of the best examples of using civility to deliver on outcomes around very difficult situations. So we have a great example from the police department. I've certainly learned about it over the year, and I think that bodes well for us here in Waxhaw. So, and finally, I've been asked to talk a little bit about some of the discussion around working out individually with outside groups. We all have official duties like the COG, CRTPO, League of Municipalities that come natural. We all have situations where we get asked to join a conversation or meeting or whatever. It's our individual choice to attend. There have been a number of these. And, you know, when we're in that situation, we represent the town whether we like it or not. That's how we're perceived. We've had a lot of instances of this, and I think suffice it to say, because I worked with our attorney, Mr. Biggers, on one particular situation, and we handled it well. When you look at our rules of procedure, rule number 4 on the first page is very clear. We'll respect and follow the rule of the law. No one elected official can represent the entire board without the board's express consent. The rule of thumb that I would suggest to everybody is, if you're not sure, check with Greg. He's got, as we talked about earlier, a boatload of experiences. And if he's not sure, the two of you can call Charlie. And if Charlie's not sure, that's probably a good thing to run as far away from it as you can, because you've probably seen just about everything. The instincts, we have two very experienced people who can guide us on that. I mention it because whether we like it or not, there's always going to be unintended consequences, ripple effects, whatever. I spent last Friday afternoon talking with some people who had a different impression of what the county was trying to do with bringing DOT out to look at the parkway and potential site. It was an innocent meeting, but the perception was that DOT was playing favorites. They can't play favorites, and I'm going to say this, I'm saying it because I want everybody to hear it, both here and out there. They can't play favorites. They're bound by law, federal law and state law, and they have to follow a process and go through a technical review and an environmental review before they can even begin to lay out a road. So, but fact is, when we participate in those things, be it county, state, whatever, there will always be a ripple effect. The more we talk as a team and share, the better off we will be, so we can all defend one another when the anticipated and questions that will come pop up. It's easy to defend, easy to explain and move forward. So I just wanted to cover that. I have no reason to believe that we've done anything other than followed rule number 4, and so I share that with all. Okay, we'll start on that side.
Just briefly, I'd like to make sure that the comments I made about the facade grants do get picked up in a future meeting, in a work session or something like that, so we can find out what the sense of the board is. I think it's been a number of years. It's probably time to discuss it, bring it up, figure out what we want to do with it. That was it.
Would you be open to the Historic Preservation Committee taking an initial stab at that as part of their, I mean, that's
yeah, I don't expect
their purview.
Yeah, the HPC and the staff come back, but just give them the general idea that we'd like to see that it's somewhat of a cost-benefit analysis.
Just evaluate the facade grant in its current form and make suggestions. So, okay. Commissioner Westlake?
I would support that as well, but I have nothing else.
I was fortunate enough to recently attend the Fiduciary Responsibilities of Elected Officials course in Hickory, and it was really a wonderful course. It was nice to hear the validation that it is our job to look at the line items, to understand the budget soup to nuts, top to bottom. It was interesting to understand more about the audit process, and one of the most interesting takeaways, I'd say, was when they said the number one reason fraud or mismanagement occurs is when you have opportunity. So when you don't pay attention to the details, when you have what they called a just trust us mentality, and you don't dig down, that is the number one reason that fraud and mismanagement occurs. So I thought that was a very interesting class, and I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't had it yet.
Thank you.
I also went to the class, and I learned quite a few things there from the lady from the state audit. And maybe these things, I won't do it tonight, but maybe we can bring these up maybe in a work session, some of the things that I learned.
Okay, that'd be great. Manager Ferguson.
Just a couple items, and I relate to public safety. One, I think it's been alluded to that Union County has not been declared by FEMA as a recipient county yet. And so we don't know what that means. It's kind of strange that they've gone this long without making a declaration. So far, we're proceeding as if that will come at some point, but it may not. As we have shared with you and are sharing tonight, our costs out of pocket are roughly $50,000 ballpark for overtime, for damage done in parks, to damage done to the suspension bridge, to response over the time of the event. So really on the worst case scenario, it's in the $50,000 range. That is a very valid reason why we have a fund balance and a fund balance policy, is that if it's not reimbursed at some point down the road, it's money out of our savings account. So fund balance, just for the folks who aren't accustomed to using that term, that's our savings. And so it's our rainy day fund, however you want to call that. So we had that event. There will be a point in the near future where we're going to have to make a decision about repairs if there's not a declaration made, because we have a suspension bridge out of order right now, and we have trails that are impacted that are closed, and there's a lot of people that are interested in getting back on those. But as Dina and Lisa both reported, there's a lot of steps that are tied to federal money, and so we may have to make a decision at some point just to go ahead and get those things repaired, and then may or may not be eligible for reimbursement.
Curiosity question, moving forward to this weekend, do you have any concerns at this point in time about Michael coming through, Hurricane Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2 to 4, 5, 6 inches could be a lot, depending on how quickly it comes down. I think right now the Thursday forecast shows it happens really on Thursday. So hopefully that'll get through, and there will not be a lot of impact, and the events for the weekend will be on schedule. Another item, I think we shared some of the documentation and information that the county shared recently on fire funding and the study that they're in the midst of. Again, that study does not take into account how the fire departments are operated, how the fire departments deal with capital purchases. It simply looks at how the county funds fire service today, and there's 2 models, a fee, and then there's the fire tax districts, which I think we've got either 5 or 6. We are one of those fire tax districts. If you sift through all the versions and models that they showed, there's very little difference in the options that would affect Waxhaw. So I'm not sure that there's a clear answer for, if it comes down to a vote at some point in the future, which model would we advocate for. There may be some other models that they consider, but this is kind of a snapshot of where they're at in the process. The timeline for the county to make a decision is not until the spring, and it's possible that they might not get to a final decision in the spring. So there's a lot of transition at the county level right now. But they did share, and they did include the towns and the fire departments that are not represented by towns in the meeting, and it was a full house and some discussion, and really no points of contention. Some discussion about we really need to look at service levels and how service levels are set, whether it's the eastern part of the county, the central part of the county, which is served by the city of Monroe, or the western suburbs. And we all have different service levels and needs. So I think that comment was made by several people and echoed. But really some of this is being driven by the fee that's charged in the majority of the eastern part of the county, and the adequacy of that to fund even operations on an ongoing basis. So.
Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody. Longest meeting of the year.